Hi, Simone and Junnifa. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, and especially to my community in Asia. I think, we are so excited to hear from the both of you personally, and I have so many questions for you. So, shall we get started?
Absolutely.
Before we begin, for Simone and Junnifer, for those of us who may not be as familiar with you, could you share a little bit about yourself with us and, how did you get to where you are today?
Jennifer, you go first.
Sure. My name is Junnifa Uzodike. I am Nigerian. I am a mom to four children 10, 9, 6, and my baby just turned one. I
Aww.
discovered Montessori before having my first child. I was actually working in the US in a completely different line. I was working for an automotive company, and I just happened to visit a Montessori school and was truly blown away by what I saw, and I wanted to know more. So I took the training. The first training I took, well, I just took a workshop actually, like a small workshop, and I loved it so much that I decided to take the AMI 0 to 3 training, and I took that just before I had my first child. And I just really had a very pleasant experience with my baby, like compared to what I had thought parenting would feel like. And I really felt like the training that I got impacted my parenting. And I know that not everybody has the opportunity to take the training or to have the experience that I had. I wanted to share what I had learned. So I started blogging and writing and sharing on
Yeah.
Instagram. And then eventually, with Simone, we wrote those two books that are really a way to share the beautiful knowledge that we gathered from Montessori.
Amazing. Thank you. And for yourself, Simone.
Yes, I've been working in Montessori now for 20 years, and I found Montessori actually through my children. So I have a 23-year-old and a 22-year-old, and we were
Wow.
looking Montessori school. No, we were looking for a preschool for our children, and then we visited a Montessori school and had the same experience as when Junnifer visited that Montessori school. As you walk in, and the environment's so beautifully prepared, and the children are working without anyone seeming to tell them what to do. You're like, how are these children so self motivated? And you can see
Yeah.
because things are so interesting, and the guide is there, the educator, to help them connect with things that they're ignoring perhaps, or giving them lessons in things where they're up to. And so there's no testing. The children just enjoy to learn, and that's what I wanted for my children, to love learning. So it wasn't long before I then started my Montessori training, and life moved me to Amsterdam. I grew up in Sydney, and my children were born there, but when we moved to Amsterdam, I started my own Montessori classroom, working again with parents and children so that I could help families bring the Montessori principles not only in the class but into their homes. And then after many years doing that, I wrote a book called The Montessori Toddler, because parents were asking me, what book should I read about this and this and this? And I said, let me just put it into one book. And that became
Wow.
Toddler. And then after that, I wrote The Montessori Baby with Junnifer. And then we've just written The Montessori Child, which is for the 3 to 12
Yes.
year olds and into adolescence.
Thank you both, for imparting all your knowledge and wisdom and basically sharing all of the goodness with us globally. How does the Montessori approach differ, especially, versus traditional parenting approach?
So there are several ways that it's different. I think for me, the biggest way that is different is just in the way that we view the child, and
Mm.
also in the way that we view our role as parents. So I think that traditionally, people look at children as helpless, or they don't know a lot, and then it's the parents' responsibility to teach them everything and to mold them to become how we would like them to be. Um, I think also they are viewed as people who should respect others, but not so much as people who deserve respect on their own. But in Montessori, we view children as human beings who come with so much potential already, who come with a lot of capacities that we need to just support and create the right environment for those things to come out. So we're not trying to fill them up or to mold them. We're really trying to help them become who they already were created to be as much as possible. Of course, they will be a person of their time and place. So if they're Singaporean, for example, because they're in that environment, they will be a person of that place, but they have unique personalities, they have unique interests, all of those things. So we are looking at them, trying to bring out those things, not forcing our own interests or our own preferences on them. We also respect them, right? In the way we
Mm.
talk to them. We're not, I mean, like in Nigeria, for example, children are expected to greet adults. Not a lot of times are adults expected to acknowledge children, so like if a child meets an adult, the first thing is like, have you greeted me? But in Montessori, we would also greet them, right? We'll say, hello, hi Sulu, how are you today? And then we know that they're watching us and they're learning from us. So I think in the view of the child, in respecting the child, and then in our role is to model to them, like, we're being ourselves, our best selves as much as possible. Our role is to create an environment that supports their development. So we're not trying to change them, we're trying to create. I really think that in Montessori, our role is kind of like a gardener or like a cultivator.
Mm.
It's an example that Dr. Montessori gives. So think about it. If the child is like a seed, when you take a seed, you don't know, like, you don't have to tell the seed what to do. There's already the plant inside the seed, right? The same way our children already have all the beautiful characteristics inside them. What does the gardener do? He prepares the soil, he prepares the container, he waters, he makes sure the plant is getting enough sunlight, and just takes care of the plant, nurtures it, warmth, and the plant does what it's supposed to do. So that's our role. We're not creating the seed. We're not putting the plant into the seed. We're just preparing the environment and nurturing it, and then allowing it to become what it's supposed to be. That was a long
Wow.
answer, but I hope that makes sense.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah. Simone, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, I think that everyone knows what traditional education is. It's kind of like we remember sitting in the classroom and putting up our hand and those kind of things, where it's so different when you walk into a Montessori classroom and the classroom set out for the children to engage in the materials themselves. So there'll be an area, for example, in a 3 to 6 environment where there's maths, and there's another area for language, and there's another area for them to do practical life things or to learn about geography and botany and all these beautiful, rich things. And the children go up to an activity that they've been shown, and then they can take it to a mat or to a table, and they get to do it themselves. And yourself, if you actually hands-on learn something, you actually have a much better understanding than if someone just tries to teach it to you and tell you something. And so that basically, I think in short, Montessori is discovering with our hands, and that is like a wonderful way to help children become curious about the world, and to help them to actually realize that they're capable and can find things out. And Montessori children, when they don't know the answer, they know that they can find it out.
Wow. And what are some misconceptions that, most of us have on the Montessori approach that maybe you want to debunk?
Well, I think a lot of people think that Montessori kids are allowed to do whatever they like. And on the other side, sometimes people think that Montessori is very strict because children can only use the pink towel, for example, in a certain way. And I think it's actually very much more somewhere in the middle, because yes, there's a lot of freedom. The children can choose what they like. But there's also certain limits. So, for example, when they're finished with the activity, they put it back on the shelf ready for the next person, because we're part of a community. Or if someone's working on activity, we don't interrupt them. We don't run across their mat. We teach them how to walk around a mat, and we teach them how to be respectful to others just as we want them to be respectful to us. So I think that would be one of the myths. I think other people say, oh, Montessori is only for children who can sit and just concentrate and they can't be distracted. And actually, I think Montessori is for every type of learner, because, for example, if you have a child that needs to move a lot, Montessori is great because they can stand and watch a friend, then they can go and choose an activity, then they can go outside and they can maybe bang a rug or move something, do something with their hands and their whole body. There's lots of movement activities in Montessori activities, because you go and get the tray, you bring it to the table. Often there's water that you need to go and fetch, and you go and get the water and you come back, and there's so much movement. Or you're playing a game where you're matching some colors, for example, and you might put some of the color tablets on this table and some of the color tablets on this table, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is yellow. Now I need to go and find yellow at that table. So there's lots of movement. Some people learn best when they see things, some people when they hear things, some people when they touch things, and Montessori is set up for all different types of learners like that as well. So I think there are two that come to mind, like, is Montessori for my child, or it's only for, people who have no limits and those kind of things. And I think it really fits families best who have similar kind of approach at home, because if you have a very strict approach at home and then they have more freedom in the classroom, then that's going to be more difficult. And if you let them do whatever they like, they're going to be like, oh, but in my school, there's actually limits, there's rules. So it's much better if the family are aligned with this Montessori approach as well.
Wow. And Junnifa, you spoke earlier about, respect for the child, and the Montessori philosophy really emphasizes that. How can we as parents maintain this respect while also guiding our kids?
I think that one of the great things about Montessori is that it actually helps us become better human beings. And that's because we're starting to live this way. I think that if we think about it, if we are respectful to everyone and we look at our children as everyone, right? They're human beings too, deserving of respect. I think then it just becomes the way that we interact with people. We interact with people respectfully in the way we talk to them, in the way we touch them, in the opportunities that we give to them. So I think that first of all, just if our interactions in general, as much as possible, are respectful. Then on the other side, you talked about, you're asking about still maintaining, like, I mean, I think some people talk about how do you help your child develop discipline, right?
Yeah.
Or how do you show them what they're supposed to learn? Like Simone mentioned earlier, in Montessori, we have freedom and responsibility. We have boundaries that we set. We just do it respectfully. So I think we do it by doing it. Like, so we talk to our children respectfully. If we have boundaries or if we have expectations of them, we present it to them. We have those conversations with them so that they know what our expectations are. We're consistent in the things that we expect of them and in the way that we respond to them. And then we set up an environment. I think that one of the biggest or the most respectful way to help our children learn things is to set up an environment that responds. So when I say that, I mean like an environment where if the child does something, they see the impact of what they do. Like, so if they forget an expectation in the morning, you're supposed to dress up, take your school bag. I'm giving an example that applies to my life right now.
Yes, please.
Take your school bag and your water bottle to school, right? So you you can be tempted. I mean, at a certain age, you're helping the child with all of those things, but at a certain age, they are expected to do that. So what happens if your child forgets to take their water bottle to school? I don't know what happens, but maybe instead of helping them do it, when they go to school, they experience the feedback from the environment.
So what you're trying to say is also if the kid forgets his or her water bottle, so we don't just run after them and put it in their bags. And what you're trying to say is just allow the natural consequence in that sense where the kid will show up in school without the water bottle and he or she might feel thirsty, but that will trigger a reminder, that hey, in future I will need my
Exactly.
water bottle, or this is a natural consequence of me forgetting my water bottle.
Right. And then I think when they come
Hmm.
back, you can work with them to determine, okay, I noticed that you've been forgetting your water bottle, but I know that that's not what you want to do. What can we do to help make sure that you don't forget? So for one
Wow.
child, might be put a note on his door, or draw a water bottle on the door so that when they're walking out the door, they see that picture. Or for another child, it might be fill up your water bottle at night and make sure that it's in your
Wow.
bag, like, so you can work with your child to figure out what is a solution that works for that specific child.
Yeah. And, I would love both of your advice and almost counsel. This morning, my eldest, Oliver, he is 3 turning 4, and he had a meltdown this morning where he just refused to shower in the morning and then go to school. That in the end, we missed school completely because he was just taking too long and he was just crying and having a really difficult time. What is the Montessori approach to managing the situation?
So for me, I think that I have found that there are different things that lead children to having a meltdown. There
Yeah.
are usually in my mind two kinds of reasons. One of them is like a basic need. So maybe they didn't sleep well or they didn't sleep enough,
Mm.
or maybe they're hungry, or maybe they are thirsty. In that situation, I will try to meet that need. Like, so if
Okay.
maybe I know he didn't sleep well at all during the night, or maybe if he's hungry, I would obviously give him food. If he's thirsty, I'll try to get him to drink. Of course, connect with him, try to make him
Yes.
feel better. Like,
Yes.
Oliver, you're having a hard time, let's go get some water, or let's go have breakfast together. Like, I would slow down,
Mm.
come to his level and just try to get him to meet that need. If he didn't sleep enough, then I would have to make the decision, like, do I think that he really needs to get some help? Do I have to get some sleep, or do I have enough capacity for him to stay home today? Or do I know that he needs to go to school, and then I just accept that he will have probably a challenging day, and I will just support him and let his teacher know that he didn't get enough sleep, so he might be cranky today. So if those are for the basic needs. Another thing that can lead to tantrum sometimes is that their emotional needs, like maybe he didn't get enough connection yesterday, or he really wanted to connect. And so I might take a moment to hug, let's read a book before we take a shower this morning. Just try to fill the child's tank a little bit. Should I read a book to you? Do you want me to bath you, or should I dress you up? Depending on, I don't know how, like you said, he's almost 4. So maybe if he used to dress himself normally, today might be a day that we do it together, just to fill up their tank. So I would meet whatever. Usually when the child is throwing a tantrum, they're communicating something. There's a need that needs to be met. So it's one of those two things. Or sometimes it's like an order issue. Like, so was there a change in routine? Or maybe there's something that is usually somewhere that is not there. It requires some observation. Sometimes something has changed in the order, and some children are very, depending on your child's personality,
sensitive
some
to
children
it.
react so strongly to a change in order, or a change in, maybe he used to take his bath before his brother, but today his brother took his bath first. Or you used to, it might be depending on the child, it might be something small. So I think it's really looking, observing, trying to analyze in your mind, like, what might be the issue, and then addressing it depending on what it is. So it could be any of those things, and it could be something else. I think it's observing, trying to understand, and then responding as kindly and respectfully as you can. And sometimes that just means accepting that it's acknowledging you're having a really hard time, you're having a tough day, and maybe it won't get better. You just keep acknowledging it until it passes, and supporting as much as you can.
Wow. How do you think about, supporting all their needs and giving them all the space that they need versus spoiling them?
Well, this is something that comes up a lot in Nigeria. You're spoiling the child.
Yeah, in
When
Asia too, you
the
can
question,
imagine.
yes, when you ask the question about misconceptions, and
Yes.
that's a big misconception, that you can love the child so much that they get spoiled. And sometimes I say, even to my husband, because the other question you asked were some of the challenges. And for me, the challenge is convincing everybody around you that
Yes.
this way that is so foreign to them will work out. So sometimes I joke with my husband when he says, "You're spoiling these children." I'll say, "They're not fruits. They don't spoil." I mean, like, or they're not, or they're not something that spoils. Do you know what I mean? But anyways,
Wow.
I think that, you know the way that Montessori works, like when you have the respect, I don't think respect is ever a bad thing. When your motive is respect, I can't see how you can be over respectful. And then, as long as you're being conscious that there's a chart that in positive, I think it's called positive discipline, where they talk about permissive
Mm.
and they talk about authoritarian, and then in the middle is authoritative. I think when you're constantly, I think a big part of Montessori is reflection, right? So on some days, you will realize when you reflect, I usually take some time, maybe at the end of the day, or just sometimes during the day, and just reflect on my actions and think to myself, could I have handled that differently? Or did I do the best that I could? And there are some times that I will think about it and I think, yeah, I was actually being permissive. Next time I
Mm.
will try to be a little more authoritative. I mean, stand to, stick with what I said and be consistent. And there are other times that I think, oh, I was quite authoritarian. I didn't quite listen to to my children, or I
Mm.
didn't quite like make sure that I was meeting their needs. So I think if you're reflective, you will constantly adjust, and then you will eventually find that balance of being authoritative, where you're not being permissive. You're not allowing them do whatever they want. You have some boundaries, right? In general, we go to school at whatever time. We go to school at this time.
Yeah.
In general, this is our routine in the morning. If a child throws a tantrum every day, then I really need to observe and figure out what's going on. Like it's usually, but if it's a one off and you meet the child's needs in that moment, I don't think you're spoiling the child. You're meeting your child's needs. And above all, I mean, like Montessori says this, and I don't know what your religion is, but I'm Christian. And in the Bible, it says that to above all, love. If you're driven by love, you love your child, but you don't love them enough that, like, it's not that you're spoiling them, allowing them do whatever they want, but your
Yeah.
child is having a hard time and you're meeting their needs. I don't think you will spoil them, and if you're constantly reflecting, like I said, asking yourself, was I permissive? Did I do I have some boundaries? Do I have some what does the child understand what the expectations are? Do I have some expectations, or can they do whatever they want every day? But if you have those expectations, if you have those boundaries and you generally hold them, in the days that you need to make an exception, as long as they're not all the time, like you can tell that the child is genuinely having a hard time, I don't think you will spoil them by meeting their needs.
Beautiful. Thank you. Simone, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think that Junnifer covered it beautifully. And I do think that probably the spoiling happens more on the permissiveness side, or when you're
Yeah.
doing for them. And actually, Montessori is not expecting that. So it's not actually saying the child can do whatever they like. So yes, they're having a hard time, and we hold space while they're having a hard time. And I like co-regulate with them. So if I'm a
Mm.
regulated adult, I can say, you're having a hard time, I'm going to help you calm down. And sometimes we actually don't have the choice to take the day off. And so then I would say, you can still be a compassionate adult and say, you're having a hard time, and today it's not an option not to go to school. And I'm going to take you and I'll walk you to the door and I'll hand you over to your teacher, and they really are going to look after you. And I know that you're going to be in safe hands. And so if you don't have the option to actually, then you're also being kind and clear and still, acknowledging their tantrum, that they're having a hard time, and, maybe you had to get to an appointment or work or whatever that situation was as well.
Yeah, I think that in turn also then helps them, like you said, I think the end goal is to also help them to be seen and heard. And I think that is also what I'm getting from, both of you. As children grow older, they also become exposed to societal influences. How does the Montessori approach help children navigate societal pressures and norms, especially during their school years?
I think that's really interesting, because it is our role as the family, to have our family values. And we might do things differently in our family. And what's really nice is, when your child's born, they grow into your family values and you create them together. And so they know that this is what we do in our house. And they know as they get older, they'll want to know the reasons for them. So you can't, like, for example, they might notice that in our house, we have very little screen time. And in other people's houses, they can watch as many as they like, And so we talk to them. I'm talking like for children who are over 6 years old. They're going to want to know why. Why are they
Yeah.
allowed to do that? We're not. Or why do they go to church and we go to synagogue, or we don't go to church at all? All of those kind of things. They want to understand the differences. So I think that when you're very secure in your values, then you can say, oh, that's what they think is important, and this is what's important in our house. And everyone's allowed to have different things that are important to them. And as they get older, we make family agreements as well. So if it's about screen time, for example, and they say it's not okay that we don't have screen time, then we can say, okay, well, you think that you should have more screen time. Let's look into this. And then you can write down, what kind of things are you wanting to do? How long do you think those things will take? I don't, in Montessori, we always talk about creating rather than consumption. So rather than being consumer of technology, we're trying to use technology as a creation tool. So then we kind of would have some clear limits and responsibilities about how they would use their technology. And then you can make those together. So then your family are involved in these decisions. So they also feel okay with saying, oh, in our family, this is what we've come up with. And they take responsibility for what they've created, because it's an agreement and they're part of that agreement. So I think that can really be helpful. And then, the more secure we are with our choices, it might be about what kind of food you eat, or all those other types of things. I find that Montessori children are very balanced, and they understand why our choices are the way they are. And maybe you can also be relaxed. Okay, well, if they're at a friend's house who watches a lot of television, that's okay, because they're there like once a while and not all the time. And then at home, there's different rules in different places.
I was just thinking again about that analogy of thinking about your child as a seed, right? Or as a
Yes.
plant. So usually, like some plants, when you plant them, there are some plants that don't do well with a lot of light, or some of them do need a lot of light. You have to know what your plant needs. And I find that especially in the early years or in the early life of the plant, those things are really important. And as a gardener, you have to be really careful. But as the plant is older and more established, they're more resilient. I think children are like that too. I always consider like the things or the people that my children or children are in general are exposed to outside of our home, kind of like light. And light can be a good thing depending on the plant. Too much can also scorch the plant or cause the plant to die. But the older they are, the more resilient they become. So I think in the beginning, for me, this is what I've done. Like in the early years, I try to have friends that share our values, like build communities that share the same kind of values as much as possible in the early years as they develop that foundation of that strength and that knowledge of what we believe in and what our values are, so that as they get older and you're having these conversations, there's a strong foundation that has already been laid. And even if they waver, the foundation is there. And
Yeah.
they're more, the older they are, the more logical they are, the more they have that reasoning mind where you can have those conversations and they understand. But by that time, for some of these things, it's already their norm. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like
Yeah.
a habit. So kind of putting them in an incubator
So they're
earlier.
conditioned already. Yeah.
Yes. And then gradually letting them, exposing them to those things, but with preparation, where you're having those conversations and then addressing it. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. You know, Simone and Junnifa, your book also emphasizes creating a family life with more connection and joy. Can you share some strategies for us, to achieve this balance in a modern, busy world?
I was actually going to talk about time because you were saying life is so busy, and yet time, if we use it to our advantage, can actually help us to bring that joy. Because if we're constantly nagging our children, we have too many things in our schedule, then it's going to be just a list of instructions that we're giving our kids, like it's time for school, now we need to go
Yeah.
out the house, maybe it's time to get bed. And
It's
actually,
like a
when you
chore.
it becomes everything just becomes a chore. And so I think we really have to look at the schedule and say what is important, what do we value, and how are we going to make it happen. So if you have two parents that work, that's completely understandable. So who are going to be caregivers so that we have a bit of space in our schedule? Or how are we going to prepare the meals so that when we walk in, we can have a little bit of connection time? Then we prepare the meal together, or we set the table together, we sit down and we have a family meal together, and then we go into like what Junnifer was talking about, was having rhythms in your day so that it flows more and you can enjoy the process of sitting with each other at mealtime, as opposed to we have to eat and then get to bed, get the kids to bed. And it's actually enjoying and using all these daily moments to be connecting. So often when we have babies, for example, I remember thinking, oh, I need to change their diaper so that we can go back to playing. And actually, when we change their diaper, we can do that in a really respectful way by like, I'm going to change your diaper now. And it's how we're holding them so gently. And is it okay if I lift your legs? I'm lifting your legs now. I'm wiping and I'm telling them all the body parts. And there's this communication where, and like almost even though they're not talking yet, I'm getting their acknowledgement. So, for example, I'm going to pick you up now. And I just wait a moment. And sometimes you just see them lift their little head. And that kind of respectful communication can start from birth. And then, even though it feels busy, we have to change their diaper anyway. Why don't we use this as a moment for connection? And often it goes smoother because they feel respected. So they're not fighting this diaper change and they're actually okay. And I think one thing we're always looking at in Montessori is like, are we meeting and supporting this child's development? So once the child can stand, we actually like to do what we call a stand-up diaper change, because they don't like to then be submissive. You can imagine now that I can stand and someone's lying me down to change my clothes, I don't like it. I want to be
Exactly. Yeah.
standing up as much as possible. So it takes a little bit more coordination and practice from us, but we can at the end kind of have them standing. So it's bringing joy into like really small moments. But I think when you allow time, you often save time as well, because there's less tantrums. There can be tantrums, and then we help navigate them and we help them calm down. We know what works for our child best when they have tantrums, rather than distracting them. What often happens is they're going to be super dysregulated if they're having a tantrum and we distract them. Then they'll just, the next thing will happen, they'll have another tantrum. If we really let them kind of relax and actually come back and regulate themselves, then they're going to be calmer for the rest of the day.
That is so important. And Simone, I'm going to stick with that point a little bit more. You talk a lot about co regulating, versus distracting them, for example, when they're having a difficult time. could you practically show us, how would you co-regulate with a toddler?
Yeah. Okay. So, for example, my son didn't want to get dressed one day and he was having a meltdown. It took 45 minutes, a tantrum. And in that day, I did not need to leave the house by a certain time. So I
Yeah.
decided to see out the whole tantrum. And for him, I was observing, do you want a hug right now? And he did. He jumped onto my lap and he was angry. He was furious. And he was like, as long as he didn't hit me, but he was really angry. And so I'm staying calm and saying, I'm not talking too much because that could overstimulate him, but I'm just checking in. It looks like you're having a hard time. Yeah, I'm here. And I would just say, like, I love you. I'm here. And just very simple things like that while he's going through that. Then I saw that the kind of anger kind of turned into disappointment, and then it turns into embarrassment a little bit, and then kind of grief. And then eventually they kind of calm down. And then if my daughter, for example, had a tantrum, it was completely opposite. It was so huge that you could almost see the steam coming out of her ears, and she did not want to be touched, like not anything. So then I just had to make sure, Emma, it looks like you're having a hard time, and I know that would you like a hug? No, okay, I'm here. Just let me know if you need a hug. And I would just keep her safe and keep checking in on her because, again, if you, some people say ignore a tantrum, but if I was really upset about something and I told my friend and they just walked out of the room, I'd think, they don't love me. They don't care about me. What are they doing? Like, I'm having a hard time now. I just need a hug, or I just need someone to say, you okay? Or can I make you a cup of tea? And then, later you can have a conversation. But when they're dysregulated, Dan Siegel has this model of the brain, which is, this is my prefrontal cortex, and this is the animal part of my brain. And when I'm having a tantrum, you can't access the prefrontal cortex. So I have to first get them to calm down and co-regulate, and your child might push you away like Emma, or they might like to be hugged, and that helps them calm down. And then they will be able to, I can talk to them later. But like things that help other children to calm down can be breathing out, like this. And when you make this sound, it helps them also remember to breathe out, help them calm down. Some children want to dance or move their body and climb, or they like to get a pillow and like bang. And actually it's really silly, like, because, oh, you look really angry, let's go bang over here. And they think it's hilarious that an adult's like kind of banging on a pillow. There can be so many ways, like and then it's just understanding your child best, what's the way. Like, for example, some children will go and run because they're stressed, or clean the house because they're stressed. But it depends on what kind of tantrum they're having and how upset they are, but sometimes you'll learn to know what works best for your child.
What was it like, Simone, when you raised your kids? Like, were there help that also that helped you in raising your kids, that you also had to help them unlearn and relearn the Montessori approach?
Yeah, so I was unlearning probably the way that I was raised, because I think we were often told, like, say good job or threaten them or bribe them, and that's how you'll get their cooperation. And then instead, the Montessori approach it's so easy to apply in a way. Like, I remember one family saying, I offered my child chocolate because they had to get in the car seat and they really hated the car seat. And I said, I can understand, that seems like something that's been working for you. And is that something that you want to continue to do? And they're like, no, that's not what I want to continue to do. I want them to be able to get into the car by themselves. And I'm like, okay, well then just try to encourage them. Like, this is what you want them to do and this is what they want to do, and make the circles kind of start intersecting. So how would you like to get to the car? Would you like to jump like a frog, or would you like to bounce like a kangaroo? And then you have these gribbit, children coming along.
Yeah.
Or can you carry this bag for me? Or would you like the carpet keys? And you're basically helping them to come along this way. And I had messages back from this lady saying, in one day it changed, because again, it goes back to what we started talking about at the very beginning, is like, once they feel respected, they want to continue that way. They don't want to be like manipulated. They want to feel like we support them and we're guiding them and helping them to do what needs to be done.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And, Simone and Junnifa, in your experience, what are some key differences parents might notice in their children's behavior and development when implementing the Montessori approach as compared to the traditional methods?
So I think one big one, because you're in Asia and this is in Nigeria, to something that often parents have to adapt to or adjust to. So Montessori children have their own opinions. They usually have thoughts of their own. and for some parents it's an adjustment, like they are able to make decisions, and they usually have, they have a decision that they want to make. And so sometimes it can come across as, wow, they're disrespectful or they don't listen, but they're not. They're just, when you have respected a child, when you have conversations with a child, then they usually feel like, I need, I can express myself respectfully. So for some people, this is an adjustment. I don't know if for us in Nigeria, when people meet my children for the first time, they're first like, wow, they really are. They're bold. They express themselves, but
Yeah.
then they like that part where they feel like, oh, these children can express themselves. But then when they tell my children to do something that maybe my children don't understand, and they say, oh, like they ask a question about it, then that same thing where they could express themselves can become for someone a negative thing. Does that make sense? So it's just,
Absolutely.
you know, but it's not a negative thing. They usually just want to understand. And once they understand, they're happy to do it, like if it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, they might just question. They're not
Which
questioning
is
because
fair.
they're
Yeah.
or disrespectful. They really just want to understand because they're logical. So
Yeah.
that's something that can be a little bit different. I think something else that stands out for my children, they are really joyful, and a lot of parents in our school give us that feedback. In a Montessori school, my children go to a Montessori school, but I think if you have multiple children, you might find this too. So in our school, the classes are mixed age classrooms. So in a classroom, you would have 3 to 6 year olds, 6 to 9 year olds. And so Montessori children are very comfortable with people of any age. So they can have a really nice conversation with an adult, and they're happy to come down to the level of a baby or a toddler and engage with the toddler at a level that I find that when we go somewhere, children who go to, like, who are raised traditionally feel more comfortable only with people of their own age or
Yeah.
like people of their own level.
The
But
peers.
I
Yeah.
find that Montessori children are very flexible and adaptable. They can usually find something to connect with a child that is older or younger. And then I think the final thing is that they are very good at entertaining themselves. Like if you drop them in a desert, I can assure you that they'll find a way to entertain themselves.
Just want to also ask if you could maybe give us an advice or encouragement, or is there a guiding principle or phrase or question that we as parents should hold on to or constantly remember and go back to, especially when we are trying our best to raise our kids, in the Montessori approach?
I think the one thing I would say is to observe your children. That would be like my mantra, because if they're giving you a hard time, observe. If they're having trouble eating, observe. Let's see what information we can get. Like, when you go to the doctor, they take your temperature and measure your pulse. They might send you for blood tests, and they get information, and then you give advice. And instead, we often in parenting just react, react, react. And when we have observation, we can get all the data, and then we have some tools. Actually, maybe it's my response. I'm realizing that the tantrum was about something that I said or something that I did. And so next time I'll avoid that by the way that I'm communicating with them, for example, or observing that the child's biting because they feel trapped in that part of my home. There's no way for them to get out of that corner. So they felt cornered in. So actually I can set up the environment in a new way. And I think that when we put on like our Montessori glasses and put on observation, it gives us the space to be more objective, rather than taking things personally. And it often means that we come up with solutions and more joyful ways of dealing with our children, so that nothing feels like a problem, but just an opportunity to teach them something or for them to learn something.
Wow, Junnifa and Simone, thank you so much for spending, your afternoon with us. We truly appreciate the work that you're doing and the wisdom that you're imparting to us, whether it's through conversations like this or even through the books that you're coming up with. And both of you have such a beautiful rapport, even though you're you have a long distance relationship. So, thank you so much. And you do have any last words you want to say to us, parents in Asia?
I just enjoy the moments with your children. Oh, yeah, I don't know if you heard me already.
Enjoy the
Enjoy the
moment.
moments. Like I said earlier, enjoy because it does pass by quickly. Enjoy. Take the moments to smell the roses, bend down, hug, laugh, be joyful. I think that some Asian cultures are very similar to African ones in a way. Like, I
Yes.
feel like we could laugh some more, we could hug some more, we could listen
Mhm.
to our children some more, we could slow down some more and just be, allow them to see our hearts a little bit more. So I think just enjoy the moments, enjoy parenting is what I would say.
Yeah, and I think Montessori is about joy. It is about all those small moments, because when your child discovers, for example, like a little droplet of water on a leaf, and they want to find out why is the droplet staying there and it's not falling off, or anything like that. It's like these are all moments that for them it's the first time, and children can open up our eyes to so many things that we miss in the world. So follow their little nuggets of curiosity and joy, and you will enjoy the process with your children.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and Simone. And, we hope that one day you get to come to Asia and we'd love to host you in Singapore and, continue to spread the goodness that you're doing. So thank you so much.